And away we go. Starting different. Today's session with one of my favorite people in the world, Mr. Bill Wooditch, the author of Fail More. And the question that I ask, what if there was a button you could push to turn your failures into successes? Now that would be a way to start different. So this series, Starting Different, here's the album cover, Bill. We created a button, which is a start button and a sunrise that people can push when they want to start different. Every day, in every way, we're starting different. Now, you and I had a little argument before, not an argument, we had a little disagreement about the ancient statement. I heard it and I see it as utile et dulce, meaning useful and sweet, but you see it, you prefer it as what?
Dulce et utile.
Either way, what the ancients said was, if you're involved with anything, let it be useful and let it be pleasing. And I can't think of a way to better describe my friend, Bill Wooditch, and his book. It is incredibly useful and incredibly pleasing. Every single page of this book, Bill, is something that people can learn from. If you're looking to start different, to link your values to your behaviors and drive the kinds of experiences you want, listen, I took 30 hours and dove into this book again, and I've interviewed a handful of people that are dear friends. You're my dad's favorite. I don't know what it is about you and the connection you have to my father, but just a little background. Bottom line up front, folks. What if there was a button you could push in your brain to turn your failures into successes? Well, you would want to hit that button. So, Bill, top 5 points. I sent them to you beforehand. You cool with us covering these as summary points? Or would you want to add anything to this before we get started?
I'm great, but I want to say something. Since you brought up your dad, all right, not only did I find him humorous and tough, but I loved his battle cry, because he carries with him ready to perform. And isn't that what life is about, that obligation to perform? See, he's on point. He's ready, man. He's ready to create opportunities, or if adversity strikes, he's going to deal with it. So shout out to your dad.
Well, he thank you, and he'll appreciate that, because he has the first 2 components of your suggestions here. And Bill, I asked you to think about this call a little differently. I asked you to think about, we were sitting outside with our 21-year-old selves, someone who was just starting in sales. And Bill, you're one of the more successful corporate sales professionals in the world. You built a $100 million business on your own. You've trained countless salespeople to work for you. I asked you, if we were sitting at that table, what would you want to share with those folks? And I'm gonna put my own thoughts in. Your top 5, I'm just gonna share them briefly. I'm gonna let you go through them in detail as we go through here. Number 1, the mindset that you approach everything with. Number 2, the momentum you can create. Number 3, very tactical, how you do that with a journal and with visualization, and the importance of reading. So let's sit down. Let's sit down at this table with our 21-year-old selves. It's a sunny day. You're 21. The future's ahead of you. Bill, what's the first thing you'd say to yourself if you had a chance to talk to yourself at 21 before you got started?
I would say there are no shortcuts to success, son. It's all in the work. You've got to do the work. Number 2, you've got to be accountable to the results. If it's to be, it's going to be up to you. And those are the 2 things I would share with my 21-year-old self.
Yeah,
because work and accountability.
It's not always going to be a sunny day. There's going to be mornings like this. This was this morning when I took this picture. That's why the window is closed, because it's storming outside. Bill, what would you say to yourself at those times in life when you were first really challenged, when you first hit adversity? What's one thing you'd say to get yourself back on track?
I always went back to a metaphor of staring into an abyss. And if nothing looks back, you're in trouble. What has to look back is your character. Because for me, character really, and resilience and being resourceful, was forged on the anvil of adversity. So that's where I think a lot of my great ideas came from. That's where I think a lot of that, I'm going to do the next thing. Here's my challenge. What about that thing? That's where it came from, Dean. So I embrace those periods, the dark periods, because from those periods of dark, I find those slivers of light, and that makes all the difference.
Yeah. I think people misunderstand success, and you have your own definition, which I'm going to have you share with folks. I have my own definition, and I thought I would look up what the word fortune means. Very large sum of money, riches, material possessions. But the second part of this is what really triggered me. Certainly the first part, because that's not how you and I define success. Even though Bill's got a beach house in Laguna and there's a Ferrari in the garage, that's not our definition of success. But in fact, Bill, what would be your definition? It's in your book. What's your definition of success?
It's the realization of my own expectations, nothing that's cut and pasted from societal mandates. And so my expectation for myself is to be the very best version of myself and continue to grow with that growth orientation that I have. It's been my number one weapon.
The second thing that triggered me here, right, on this definition, and you're waving your pen and it's scaring me because it's appearing to be a pen that's like 3 feet long because it's so close to, but prosperity is attained.
Sword.
Fortune, prosperity attained partly through luck. Isn't that what so many people think of when they think of success? Well, that person was just lucky. Your thoughts, Bill?
A person can get away from that the self-responsibility and say, yeah, that person was lucky. They were born into this, or they had this favor going for them from chance and all these different things. Branch Rickey said that luck is the residue of design. So I think you put yourself in position to be fortunate, take advantage of those opportunities and perform.
Well, you know, the ancients, when they thought of fortune, they actually thought of a person. They thought of fortuna. They thought of the fortune as being something physical out there, and that fortune favored certain people, and fortune favored the brave. Fortune favored the strong. In fact, the Stoics would tell us that fortune is like a gladiator who only chooses strong people to fight with. She gets no honor in fighting someone weak. And that, in effect, if you've been challenged, if you failed, it's because you've been deemed worthy. Which brings me to this third definition of failure, that it is an instance, an event. But the second part of this is what really struck me, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Non-performance of something due, required, or expected.
The first thing that's due and required and expected is that you show up. Second thing is that you show up prepared. So if you don't show up, you miss meetings, you're not accountable to a result, you don't show up prepared, you're going to lose. So those statements inherent in what non-performance is the simple things like just show up.
Well, let's go out and sit on this bench. This is outside. This was the first morning that I started this series. I took this picture before I interviewed Dr. Bill Crawford, who's had 2 PBS specials and has 7 books published. But I'm asking people I know to contribute something useful during this time of disruption. You know, and I'm going to ask you what your approach to failure is, because you're one of the more successful guys in America. Why you think those things worked, and how you approach thinking about a setback. You know, so let's go through these 5. I'll throw out the word and you give me your thought. So Bill's top 5. Number 1, mindset.
Growth oriented. Growth oriented as opposed to fixed. Fixed is going for the grade, the perfect score, going on something that's measurable. But growth is something that's not measurable. The only thing that you can see or quantify in growth is that willingness to take the risk and to try, because you're always aspiring for more. And that is a very different mindset than one that is fixed on a certain outcome. Growth is, go ahead.
Well, a lot of my work over the last 10 years has been about the brain, and the brain perceives anything different as risky. And you talk a lot in your book about how people perceive risk and perceive danger and perceive threat. And one of the things you differentiate is between something that is a life-threatening risk, and most people think any change is life-threatening. So I think that this concept of seeing failing as an acronym, find an important lesson, invite needed growth. And everything about that is mindset.
Yes.
Agreed?
Absolutely.
Number 2, let me throw the second word out at you, momentum.
It's the one thing you always know you lose, and it's the hardest thing to gain and maintain, momentum. But it's the most critical thing we can do to have continued, sustained success. You got to put yourself in motion. You got to do the things you don't want to do sometimes. You've got to do the work, and you've got to keep the activity level high so your momentum keeps flowing forward.
So I think people are always looking for big improvement, and you make the point that incremental, you know, the math that I share in the change programs that I do with corporations is if we improve 1% a day, in 70 days, we're twice as good. And there's experts that talk about a thing in motion, staying in motion. The brain loves it. So I'm going to ask you, think about how you get that started every day. Bill, how do you do it every day?
What you just stated is to keep that close at hand and to have that written down so you remember why you started and why you're doing what you do, because that momentum is critical. And that momentum comes from the motivation to do those things, to acquire the habit, because it's habit that is more, to me, important than the motivation to do it. The habits that you acquire.
Mindset, develop momentum, and then you talked about writing it down just now. So that brings us into the third point. And I've been I have a drawer full of blank journals because I never want to be without a journal. Talk to me about this word journal and why journaling has been so important, you believe, to your success.
You know, I think how do you know where you want to go or where you're going or how to get there if you don't know where you've been? And I'm not just talking about the tactics or the strategies, but how did you feel? Because fear is that feeling of desperation, that feeling of rejection. You need to get in touch with your feeling. Then you need to understand what the source of that feeling was, and then take those incremental steps to move through it. So journaling is a way back to go forward.
So we know from brain science that when we get things out of our brain into writing, when we handwrite something, we're actually imprinting our brain. The principle says writing makes it twice as likely for us to follow through. Number 4, even more powerful than writing, the power of visualization. Speak to you visualize and why you say it's so important in your book.
I visualized everything I ever did in sales from the very first call before I made the call to getting the yes. I went through the entire process in detail. And that visualization to realization, the middle part of that whole Oreo cookie, the sweet spot, is the work. You've got to do those things. You can't wish, it's a fantasy. You can't visualize and without the work, it's just fantasy. So you got to do those things, put yourself in play, learning from the lessons of failure to succeed. But first visualizing to realize is most important to me. Being able to visualize every little detail, and then here comes the realization part. Work.
Whatever that thing is we want to achieve. We know that information gets to the brain 30 times faster through the eyes than through the ears. So, and I've been blessed, Bill. I've met some fairly, as anyone would consider, fairly successful people. And you've interviewed some of the most successful people in the world and talked to them in the writing of your book. One of the things that I see consistently is that they visualize. I know he was making $100 million sale the day after I met him. The day I met him, we were having dinner. He told me that this was going to happen tomorrow. This was a celebratory dinner. He had a poster in his garage for the last 3 years. Every time he pulled into his garage, that poster was the visual that he saw for what he wanted to attain. He saw it every morning when he backed out of the garage, and he saw it every evening when he drove into the garage. Talk to me for a moment, if you would, about how you have applied visualization to specific goals. I know how you applied it to sell it.
Before I ever knew where California was, except to look on a map, I cut out a picture of a Ferrari and I cut out a picture of a home in California overlooking the beach. And every day when I sat down in my cubicle, I would look at that. And I could almost feel that Italian leather. I could smell it. And I could see that view. And every time that the phone calls got heavy, that I didn't want to get rejected again, that I felt like I was out of steam, I said, no, this is why you're doing it. You're doing it so you can enjoy this type of lifestyle, these choices that you can make from doing the work now. And that's the biggest thing, and that really propelled me forward.
Huge. Every high achiever. Also, in addition to visualization, point number 5, the continued learning, the reading. Talk to me about how important reading has been to you and why you would make it as a recommendation to someone who is 21, just getting started.
It's like the air that you breathe. It's essential for my life. I mean, I could exist by turning on a television probably, but I can't live unless I read. How can you ever export great ideas if you don't import them first? And we talked about this off air. You don't import ideas and export them as your idea when it's someone else's. You synthesize it. You ask the questions. Some of that stuff's not good, but some of that stuff will percolate and inspire a certain level of thought that has you on a search for more, a quest to learn more. And from there, you're able to know more and do more.
Well, I know you've taught hundreds and hundreds within your company of professionals over the years to be successful, and now thousands with the work you're doing in the keynotes. I'm going to suggest that one thing that's different about the way that I approach learning, and I'm going to suggest it to people on this phone call, is I approach reading and learning with the intent to teach. So those 5 points that Bill made, and we're going to get into some specifics next, I want you each to commit to teaching 2 people within the next 24 hours. And you know what? You would do that if your life depended on it. And I'm going to tell you right now that the quality of your life does depend on it. You're here, we get only one, and there's great teachers like Bill out there that can help us how to get the most out of our life. So good news, bad news, Bill, before I get in, go back to the bench and we get into some of the specifics. Good news is everyone on this phone call was born with a brain. The bad news is none of them were born with a user manual. So another piece of good news, another piece of bad news is that we're all going to face failure. And this is one thing that I wish someone had shared with me when I was 21. Failure with learning is success. Success without learning is failure. Bill, before we go any farther, your thoughts, because this is so resonant in your book, this concept.
If you fail without learning from the lesson, it's simply an experience. If you learn the lesson and it's something you can apply for success, the entire thing, the entire effort is a success. And success without failure, there's no, what is the lesson? What is the improvement point? What's the point of inflection that you can learn from? So I think it's that, I always say this, Dean, that failure is the indispensable teacher for the student of life who's willing to aspire to grow. It's as simple as that.
There's only a handful of people that come to mind. Now, I've delivered my presentation. We're going to talk now about how we first met, but I delivered my training course, my 3-hour basic or 1 day, however I decided to do it that time when you and I were together. But I've delivered it more than 1,000 times. I can think of only 5 people that came into that session with a focus on learning that I saw. And by the way, of the 5, I would say the average person in that group is worth over $100 million. Bill, do you remember when we met? What do you remember about you and I meeting?
Well, I remember you were playing a Rolling Stones song. That was an immediate connection before your talk. I also remember this. I also remember thinking, wow, I got a long way to go because this guy is really good. So you had a certain level of style of engagement that you were actually teaching, and it was as if you were talking to me. And I was learning so much from your examples. No, I just learned from your examples. And to this day, I still say you're the best speaker that I've ever seen.
That is incredible.
You didn't pay me to say that, but it's true.
No, this is, in fact, here's what I remember about meeting you. And whether it was at the hotel when Henry brought you over, or whether our dear friend Henry, or whether it was actually in the course. Folks, you ever out of the corner of your eye, you're on the highway and you see a car and you just know it's something special? You just know it's really designed special, whether it's a Ferrari or a Bentley. The same thing can happen to me with bugs. I see a bug out of the corner of my eye, I just know it's a badass. And that was my first impression, Bill, of you, was that this person with humility just reeked of achievement and success. And the one thing I noticed even more, and you paid to attend my session, but everyone pays. Very few people pay attention. You paid more attention that day than 99% of the people who have gone through. And I pay attention also. So one of the things that resonates with me is the very title of your book. So tell us about the title, Fail More.
Fail More is an aspirational calling for those who would need and want success to be able to go through the travails to get to the triumph. You need to learn to fail more if you're going to ever raise your bar of achievement. If you want the same, then do less, but you've got to be able to put yourself in play. Every devil's got another level, Dean, and you've got to be able to fail intelligently forward, but do it a lot. Do it so you master and then move it up to the next level, because that mastery is, according to Gladwell, 10,000 hours. That's a whole lot of failure before you get to
Well,
master.
you know, everyone is an overnight success, but the night was 10,000 hours long.
Right.
Right? So let's go back to our 21-year-old selves sitting on that bench. And let's also think about the times when we failed, the times when that bench wasn't sunny. Two things jumped out immediately from my book that I wish someone had given me when I was 21. The first thing is a permission slip. And Bill, what would the permission slip say?
Permission slip would say, son, it is okay to fail if you are failing and growing and learning so you can apply it for future success.
Number one thing I wish someone would have said to me, because no one ever said that to me. Number two, I wish someone had held out a sheet of paper and made me sign a non-compete. What would that non-compete say, Bill?
Don't compare yourself to others.
Someone's always going to have a bigger boat. Someone's always going to have a worse situation than you're in, even today in this crisis. But number one, I wish someone had told me on that bench that if I wish I had a chance to meet me or you, Bill, when I was 21, and they said, it's okay to screw up and stop comparing yourselves to others. So compete only with yourself, collaborate with your tribe. This comes through in your book in terms of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And also this concept that you and I both were raised with, which is this concept of contribution, right? So if you were, you told me as we were waiting for the call, if you had a job paying you $1 an hour, what did your parents tell you?
You better give $1.10 worth of value.
Give more. And that's what my dad says to me every day. How about this line, Bill? You've hit a wall, and Bill learns the lesson that, and you can finish this sentence, if it's going to be, it's
up to me.
And I would say it this way. I think there's a point in all of our lives, every single person who strives to be successful, when we realize this comment that I have on the screen: no one is coming to save you. It is your ability to respond, and that's what we mean by responsibility. It is up to you. The second thing along the same line, even though you're in trouble, no one is coming to save you, here's the good news. There's a difference between being broke and being broken. Does that resonate with you, Bill?
100%. 100%.
Tell me why.
I have.
I don't know if you've ever been broke, but I've been broke a dozen times in my life.
Well, I think there are periods, especially during material acquisition, where I had a poverty, an impoverished soul, a poverty of maybe a dented spirit. So that to me was being broke, but broken, never. Indefatigable spirit that I never gave up on the opportunity for a better tomorrow. Never give up on that.
So 2 tactical things that I wish someone had told me. Now, actually, my dad did tell me this. Find the people who are already doing it. Bill, what would your advice be to someone who's new at anything, but especially at sales?
Success leaves clues. And further to your point on collaboration, I learned this a long time ago when I failed to get into an Ivy League school for law school. One of the many reasons was I couldn't understand the essay question that was part of the introductory process, and it was "No Man is an Island" by John Donne. I didn't know what that meant. So I was like, Gilligan's Island, what the hell is that? None of us get out of here without the help of others. So we need to collaborate to move forward in life. And I think by finding those people that you are the ones you aspire to be like, we want to be with people that are like us, people that we want to be like. And so I want those people with those attitudes, those habits that I can learn from, their discipline, their willpower. What can I take from there? Some of the greatest mentors in my life are those people who have taught me about discipline, habit, will, and word. Huge.
And I would say you don't have to mimic their style. Style is something that should be all yours, but you should try to identify their approach because of the second quote that I have here, which is, it's all a process. Whether it's sales, whether it's anything, there's a process. You know, and I wish someone had taught that to me early, because it took me 30 years to figure out that there's a process, which I've documented, and which was there's a process to selling. You know, and Bill, you're laughing. Tell me what's coming to mind when you're thinking about process.
I'm thinking all the hard work in understanding that, hey, it is a process. It's not a solo one-time event. That's just an occurrence. You want sustained success, you've got to be able to marry a process to a result. And it takes time to learn what that process is.
Well, and I see things like you say, that success leaves traces. Because I pay attention and I read differently, but I think part of the reason that I see, and here's the markups that I've had the 3 times I've read your book. I think I see things differently because I started going blind when I was 17. And when I was 29, both my eyes came apart, and I recognized that my brain is constantly scanning the environment. I'm looking for cues about what's going to happen next. I'm looking for shortcuts. I'm looking for patterns. And so is everyone on this call. Your brain operates the same way mine does. But more importantly, people like Bill have taken their lives and created consciously cues in their surroundings. Let me give you an example. So when Bill is publishing his first book, he sends me a coffee. There's the first mug, by the way. The first mug that you here's the second one that you sent me when Always Forward was published. But this first one with the letters, Bill, because you know people are going to look it up. What do the letters stand for?
You can't do good business sitting on your ass.
Every morning I pick that cup up, I think of you, but it's a cue. And you know what it's a cue to remind us of? The same thing that this ruler says. This is another cue that Bill sent. Activity rules success. Whether it's sales, whether it's anything, guys, success is a numbers game. Do you know your numbers? You know, Bill, you and I have something else in common. I mean, we grew up in an environment where we needed to make cold calls to survive. And I consider myself, as I know you do, the greatest cold caller in the world. So when you're a cold caller, tell us what this number means. Failing 1,575 times per week.
Let's go back to your mindset. I established a mindset that if I had to fail thousands of times to get one yes, I was willing to pay that price. I was willing to sacrifice to get. And that's one of the most important things I learned young is, what do you want? What are you willing to get for it? What are you willing to give up to do? What are you willing to endure? So for me, I went through a lot of failure, Dean, and I made those calls to get to that one yes. As I learned from those failures, the process got better, tighter, and it wasn't as much, it wasn't 2,000 calls at a time after a while.
And every industry has those numbers. To be continuously excellent, guys, you got to know what, and I'm talking Top Gun good at anything. You have to learn the lessons along the way. So a couple of quotes from Bill's book, because we're at the 20-minute mark. Number 1, your next level of achievement will be contingent upon your ability to learn the lessons of failure and apply them. Thoughts?
How can you move forward unless you learn from what happened that prevented your growth in the first place? You've got to be able to apply those things that can then benefit you going forward. That's the key to growth in any level.
Awesome. Second quote that resonated for me. Quote from C.S. Lewis: you can't go back and change the beginning. You can start where you are and change the ending.
You know, Dean, so many of us are caught in this narrative of the past, and that we stay back there because we think bad things are going to happen because they happened to us before. Hey, we have a chance every day. Every day you open your eyes is a gift. Use that gift to make a difference in your life, and you can change the entire course of your life that day.
Yep. The thoughts from people who have achieved, I think the thoughts of this one achiever, and I never would have known that Steve Harvey, the comedian, the television, he's someone you know personally, you've been on his show a number of times, but my gosh, he is a wealth of knowledge. Tell me what jumps out at you when you think of Steve Harvey and your interactions with him.
When I sat next to him, I thought, how fortunate am I to be here? Because he is real, he's relatable, and he really cares. And I found he had a tremendous depth. Sometimes it was, the scars of failure are covered in humor. So he uses a lot of humor. But inside, the real guy, he cared about his audience. He wanted to get the message out there, and he really cared about what they did with that message. I just love Steve Harvey.
So, and his quotes were very powerful to me in reading the book. And the fact that here is a guy who really has known failure and has never quit because he focused on what he really wanted. And you and I know, have drunk from the same river of knowledge. Part of that Zig Ziglar, you can have anything you want if you're willing to do what's necessary. The question is, what do you really want?
Yes.
So what's the life you want to have? What are you willing to do? Bill, you've given people 5 best practices to think about as they begin this journey. You know, I just want to show you guys the power of visualization. Here's a wall in my kitchen. Down on the bottom, you see a link to what my core values are, but up top, more than a year ago, I identified what the perfect 90 days would look like in my life. Now, I didn't know I'd be sequestered here in Florida, but part of that perfect 90 days was me writing the next book, me interviewing the critical people that I know can help people. And Bill, you're one of those people. So find an important lesson, invite needed growth. It's a process. Bill, any final thoughts? I put up a few slides of a Ferrari here that went off the road because it didn't have the right mechanic like you to keep it running. You know, I think about wheel alignments. I think about wheel alignments with people, but any final thoughts you would like to share with people about living the kind of life and learning from failure?
Success and failure are different sides of the same coin. And, you know, think about this as a takeaway. Instead of what is it you really want, what are you willing to endure? Ask yourself that question first before you ever jump into the fray. It's going to give you most of the answers on the way.
Bill, I read hundreds and hundreds of books, and you know that about me. In any given week, I'll be reading 2 or 3 books. I've read yours 3 times, and that's because it's significant. You have made a contribution. You have made a difference, and this is going to live longer than both of us. Guys, I just want to show you one page because you got to get the book and you got to get to page 89 because Bill lays out a process for you to follow where you can reframe failure. Bill, if anyone wanted to contact you, are you okay with people reaching out to you?
I would encourage you to do so. Yes.
So Bill's email address, bwooditch@wooditch.com, and the website is billwooditch.com. Folks, he has a huge following out there already. If you go and check out his videos and you check out what he's doing on some of the social media platforms, but you really want to bring him to come in and make a difference for your team. If you're looking to start different, you're looking to hit that button, every day is a chance for us to start different. Bill, here's me with one of my favorite rock stars, Chris Robinson of the Black Crowes. You're a rock star to me. And I felt the same way when I got your autograph as when I got Chris's. And again, folks have seen this statue because I end every presentation with it. This guy's not so much building himself as revealing himself. And that's what I feel these times are, these times of disruptions. So Bill, I'm going to leave us with this final thought. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was what we made of it. Brother, it's been my pleasure having you on. Thank you so much, buddy.
It's been an honor. Thank you, Dean.
All right. Cheers, buddy. Bye-bye.